For over 30 years, Gazprom has been a reliable gas supplier to the countries of Europe.
That was once the spiel, but no longer, as this Russian energy giant is turning off the gas taps to Poland and Bulgaria, and won't be switching them back, they say, until nations are willing to pay for supplies in rubles. The Polish Prime Minister this afternoon picking his words and his backdrop carefully for maximum defiance.
We are not going to pay in rubles for Russian gas. We appeal to all our partners in the EU to not pay in rubles for Russian gas. We will do everything in order to burden Russia with contractual penalties, because that behaviour is totally beyond the law.
Calculated bullishness from a Prime Minister who has long suspected such a move, has been stockpiling at storage facilities so they are 3/4 full, and it's getting warmer. Energy and economics have been a pillar of this war since day one. As bombs started to fall on Ukraine, sanctions were slapped on Russian banks and anyone wishing to deal in rubles. Today, in Bulgaria and Poland, Russia hit back.
By taking the measures I just mentioned, we not only softened, but repelled, blocked the very first crushing blow, as they believed in the West, of illegitimate sanctions against our country.
This is the pipeline that supplies Bulgaria with 90% of its gas, courtesy of Gazprom. Today, the Bulgarian Prime Minister accused Vladimir Putin of blackmail. But there is unease across the rest of Europe. 40% of the EU's gas comes from Russia, and as bombs drop, oil and gas still flows, so too does €1 billion a day to the nation that invaded Ukraine. That will change, says the President of the European Commission.
Today, the Kremlin failed once again in his attempt to sow division among member states. The era of Russian fossil fuel in Europe is coming to an end. Europe is moving forward on energy issues.
Russian gas comes into Europe through a network of pipelines, from Nord Stream directly into Germany, with others crossing Poland and Ukraine, and another feeding the south of Europe. But if all of these were shut off, who else could buy Russian gas? Well, there's an existing pipeline to China, the power of Siberia, and plans to build another have been agreed by the two superpowers. But it won't be a quick fix for Russia.
Expanding exports to Asia today would require a massive expansion of its gas export infrastructure, of its logistical network. You have to build pipelines to China, you have to build pipelines to India, and that takes money, that takes resources, and that takes time. It cannot be done overnight. So there's a huge cost for Russia in playing this game.
Western officials today said that this move by Russia could prove counterproductive. There's already been growing concern among EU nations that reliance on Russian energy is a strategic liability. Switching off the taps has put rocket boosters under plans to find alternatives which will affect Russia economically long term. But it will affect us too. This morning, the price of gas jumped 24%, while we're already in a cost of living crisis driven mainly by high energy costs. Some economists are now predicting that inflation could hit 10% by autumn.
Every year, Gazprom is capable of recovering over 500 billion cubic meters of gas.
Russia and the EU are both big on bombast over who really holds the upper hand. The long-term plan is for Europe to wean itself off Russian gas, but the short-term reality is restricted supplies and rising prices.
Paul McNamara there. Well, earlier I spoke to the Bulgarian MEP Eva Majdel. I started by asking her if what Russia was doing amounted to blackmail.
Well, I think by cutting gas supplies, both in Poland and Bulgaria, basically what Russia is doing is testing the reactions of respectively the strongest, but also the weakest point of the EU so far in this war. What I think is happening is that Putin is trying, so to say, to turn the screws by hitting Bulgaria. He's pressing hard to create basically the maximum amount of fear and division within Europe by trying to discredit the solidarity within the EU.
Right.
He's probably trying to hint what could happen to other countries who refuse to pay in rubles.
There is no economy more reliant on Russian gas than the biggest economy in Europe, and that's the German one. There are reports today, unconfirmed, that Germany might be thinking eventually of paying for its Russian gas in rubles, which would, of course, cause outrage in the European Union. What would your response be to that?
We need to differentiate whether we are talking about member states themselves paying in rubles or private companies paying in rubles. Nevertheless, one should know that this goes against the sanctions that we have imposed towards Russia. And this is why, more than ever, we need to be able to pay the short-term price of cutting off Putin's main revenue source in order to secure a long-term independence and prosperity in the European Union. And this is what the European institutions are working for right now. With full honesty, I think this is what we should have been working on over the past couple of years. But we find ourselves where we are today. And my belief is that now and today, more than ever, there is European unity to take these important steps forward.
So if Bulgaria can put up with the sacrifice of not doing with Russian gas, Germany and Austria and the bigger economies in Europe should do exactly the same.
In the current situation that we find ourselves in, I believe this is the solution we should be seeking because, as I said, we already have certain plans in place. And it's about time for the European Union to be able to put these plans into action. We have intensified talks with the US and with many other partners on how to do so. It's about time to be able to do so as soon as possible. It's a very difficult and very hard decision, but it's a necessary decision because, democracy and freedom has no price at this point.
But do you think that the consumers in Bulgaria, in Poland, and also in Germany and Austria, the consumers are prepared to put up with this?
But this is why, as I said, governments have to have measures. They have to have a plan. It's not enough to say we're going to fill in our storages with alternative gas coming from one of our neighbors. This is why we need responsible leadership, leadership that can have a concrete action plan, a concrete roadmap. And this is a roadmap that cannot be produced today or tomorrow. It had to be produced 2 months ago, and ideally even a year and a half ago, or even before that. But since the war started, I think the stakes for European leaders were very, very clear. And I think the institutions here in Brussels have been hinting on that, have been working towards that, and we need political leadership back in the member states.
But you're worried that your country, Bulgaria, might buckle under the pressure.
I'm worried, as I said, that my country, Bulgaria, having in mind the events over the past couple of weeks, not being able to come up with a unified position on whether it should support Ukraine with weapons, it would make it this situation now would make it more and more difficult for the government to be able to take very clear positions on the war in Ukraine. And what we need today is real leadership. We need not talk, we need action.
Okay, got to leave it there. Eva Majdal, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, as the row over gas intensifies, Russian forces have continued their offensive in the east and in the south of Ukraine. Defiant residents took to the streets in the southern city of Kherson, angry about Russian occupiers' plans to hold a sham referendum to establish a new People's Republic. Many are now fleeing north to the village of Zelenodolsk, still in Ukrainian hands. Our international editor travelled there today to hear their stories. Lindsay Hilson joins us now from nearby Kryvyi Rih. Lindsay.
Matt, you'll remember at the beginning of the war, those pictures of the people of Kherson out protesting with their Ukrainian flags against the Russian occupation. Well, they stopped because so many of them were beaten or arrested. But out they were again today, about 100 of them. Why? because they are so angry about this fake referendum which is being planned, in which Kherson will become a people's republic allied with Russia. They're also angry because the Ukrainian flag has been taken down from the municipal building. The Russian flag is up. The Russians have ousted the local leadership, put in their own people, and also increasingly young men are being conscripted into the Russian army. Now, the authorities here in the Ukrainian part of this region say that 4,000 people have fled Kherson, the city and the surrounding villages, in the last 5 days. They can't do it by car because the Russians stop them, so they come all sorts of back routes. We met some of those people today, including one man. His story of the violence meted out to him by Russian soldiers was truly shocking. 5 days ago, Alexander Pashchenko went through the worst experience of his life at the hands of 3 drunken Russian soldiers.
Топором побили, топором там у високополі мене там. Отак, так і так. І ребра поламали, руки все перебивали, і ноги теж отут отак ось понабивали. А ребра поломані, тут 3, а тут 2. І в мене сотрясення мозга. Сотрясення мозга, я не соображаю так. І рвота в мене, рвота, нудота. І все болить.
He's with a group who just this morning escaped to Zelendolsk from villages occupied by Russian soldiers in the Kherson area. Alexander told me his mistake was to protest when the soldiers demanded that a neighbor, a woman, give them vodka.
Заходили в дом і забирали картошку, кушать забирали вони. І закатку, там сало було закатане, з холодильника все. Я говорю, а що ж ви це? Молчать, бах, 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 бах. І отак.
This morning, people in Kherson were protesting about the brutality of Russian rule. They've come to our house uninvited, say the placards. They're determined to resist a Russian plan to create a Kherson People's Republic, a separatist state.
Ребята, смотрите, вот так много людей у нас сегодня вышло на площадь. Это реальные херсонцы. Это те, кто против создания ХНР, это те, кто против присоединения к оккупантам.
It's dangerous to protest and to take pictures. And before long, the Russians responded with tear gas and stun grenades, reportedly injuring 4 people. The mayor, ousted by the Russians but still in Kherson, sent us this account.
Але на мітинги було більш 100 людей. Ті активні патріоти нашого міста, які вийшли на мітинг. Зі сторони Російської Федерації була застосована зброя, були шумові гранати, які слізоточивий газ, який був залучений проти наших мешканців міста.
Back in Zelendolsk, the local authorities are accumulating bicycles. People flee Kherson on foot or by bike because the Russians won't let them leave by car.
Не випускали, а це ми втекли. Що утром рано проснулись, дітей і пішли. Пішком до Добрянки, а там нас уже машинами наші сюди повивозили.
Those who arrived today are being taken by bus to the city of Kryvyi Rih. Families who can no longer endure Russian rule and don't want to be part of any Potemkin Russian republic.
Чи вам опустити панду, щоб підняли? Піднімете?
Підніму одну.
Alexander's going for hospital treatment and will hopefully recover from his beating by Russian soldiers who claim to be liberating the people of Kherson. People who never asked to be liberated, let alone occupied and made subject to foreign rule.